Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Georgia Court. I'm the proprietor at Bookstore Number 1 in Sarasota, and I'm very glad to see so many poetry lovers in the room. And I see one image here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people in it. Yay! Lilo, Bobby Scott, Madeline, Emily, Bill, and Elaine. That is a tremendous group. Thank you for being here.
That's my
But
son and grandchildren.
fabulous. So you
And
have a
daughter.
fan club. That's great. Okay, just one bit of housekeeping before we go to our reading. That is that in the chat function, you will find at the very top of it a link to where you can purchase Mary Katherine Wainwright's book, Taste of Salt. That takes you to a link directly at bookstore number 1. And just a quick reminder for the couple people I see who popped in just a couple of seconds ago, please, if you are not a speaker right now, keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation. We have 3 poets who are going to read. I'm going to introduce them one at a time. I'll give a brief bio of them just before they read. And then when we're finished, we will open it up to Q&A, discussion, whatever you'd like to say. And at that time, I'll ask you all, anyone who wants to speak, to go ahead and unmute. Our first poet today is Greg Gaul. Greg Gaul's poems have been published on mainly 3 worldwide poetry websites: poetrysoup.com, allpoetry.com, and poemhunter.com. His works have won nearly 300 awards in contests on these sites and have been front page featured poems many times. He writes poetry on many subjects, most prominently advocacy, nature or science, seaside, metaphysical, and light verse. His personal background includes nearly 50 years in the advertising agency business, serving both management and creative roles, helping national, international, and regional clients in all media. He and his wife are regular snowbirds in Sarasota, who are from the Philadelphia area. And when they're here, they stay on Lido Key. And I know you're not here today, Greg, you're in Philadelphia, but welcome. Please welcome Greg Gaul.
Thank you, Georgia, for all you do. And Mary Katherine and Doug, great to be with you today. For all of you, people come to these readings to find a poem that they can enjoy. So I hope on our Zoom today that you find something that you can enjoy from my eclectic collection. The first poem is light verse. My wife and I have studied meditation and Buddhism since the 1990s. And my wife, Jean, likes this poem. The title is Karmic Delights. Just got some. They come in packs of 24. I like to heat up 3 or 6 at a time. They're these little swirls about 1 inch wide, mini sticky buns, sorta. There's caramel in there and a glaze on top. Absolutely scrumptious. You can pop them in the oven, or I just microwave mine. When they come out all warm and gooey, you can pick them up in your fingers. Did I mention they're scrumptious? Oh yes, you can't eat them. They're only for others. Karmic delights, yummy. End of poem. This next one is a quintella on Buddhist life perspective. The title is Droplet. Little droplet, your time is near. Never fear, be part of it. Fall into the great ocean, your conscious way. Unconscious stay, nature's final notion. Lean back, let it go. It happens so, embrace the black. Droplet, make a tiny splash. Whisper in your bardo ear, till you're no longer here, and flesh turns to simple ash. So sleep, little droplet, how sweet the dew, to love it and live it, and to start anew. End of poem. This next one is a couplet, a different take on the virus. The title is The Virus is Us. A feisty Zen priest recently told me Earth's most toxic virus is humanity. Riding on this muddy blue ball so lush, could we only be a bit of carbon slush? A tiny blink, galactic tale untold, while on a grand scale, not really that old. So why, oh why, is there all this fuss? One must say, cause the virus is us. There are nations' records to abhor. Pestilence seems too much to endure. Wars started by ego, all should deplore. Wars about divinity, hard to ignore. Wars of ethnicity, need I say more? We've seen this story for ages before. So why, oh why, listen to Malthus? One must say, cause the virus is us. We claim intellect dwells only in us. Nature covets secrets yet to discuss. Predator strains from our primal soup. Failing incompetence, how low we stoop. Live through this virus pandemic reality. Then one asks, what sorts of fools are we? So why, oh why, are we stumbling thus? One must say, cause the virus is us. As a carbon-based life form, we dominate this sphere. As Earth's cosmic life goes on, we may no longer be here. End of poem. This next one also is couplet, a nostalgic societal statement. Title is Howdy Doody Conversation. Puppets like me, we never age, nor do I think I'm some sort of sage. However, I've noticed troubles over the years. I'd like to talk about them and some of my peers. Since I'm over 70 years old now, you know, for lots of years, I've missed the old show, the values we taught, honesty, to be kind. In our culture today, are getting harder to find. Where's Buffalo Bob when we need him so? I'm still awfully sad that he had to go. My best friend was so kind. He was so fair. Isn't a voice like his out there somewhere? Mr. Bluster still tries to take over Dutyville, even though I doubt that he ever really will. Hyperbole and schemes are in his portfolio. It's impossible to guess which way he'll go. Bluster is planning with his pal Dilly Dally to take us all down a very dark alley. Phineas T. hasn't learned very well when he told Clarabelle to go to hell. He then attempted to conjure an illicit fling with Princess Summerfall Winter Spring. His continued attacks on our little town will never put beloved Dutyville down. Now that the peanut gallery actually can vote, your cheers and values needn't seem so remote. Truth is, I'm simply an old wooden voice. America's got issues and you've got a choice. See you, kids. Howdy do to you. End of poem. This one's free verse. Nature has a way of teaching us. The title, The One-Legged Sandpiper. I saw a one-legged sandpiper today on the beach. I saw him land on his single pedestal. It was an artful thing. Entranced by his disability, I stood transfixed with curiosity. I so wanted to help him, but we're worlds apart. How can he feed? How can he fend? Suddenly he flew away up the beach. I followed him. There he stood, lightly wafting in the wind, still balanced on that single leg. His fellow sandpipers scurry about, unnoticing his remarkable challenge. Later, a kindly friend told me shorebirds often hide one leg to conserve energy. Silly, I felt a loss. for my misplaced empathy towards my one-legged friend. What a self-centered bubble I live in. We're always so troubled by what we think we know. Truth is, we know so little. Next time on the beach, I'll look for the one-legged sandpiper. It'll remind me that there's so much I still don't know. End of poem. This next one also is free verse for one of my mentors, Nancy Rosenberger. The title is Rudy Fell. He lies on the living room carpet, conscious, groggy, but awake. No signs of injury, lightly moaning. Leaning over him, how to help. He fell last Thursday, too. Better letting him settle before trying getting him up. Maybe I'll need to call my son or ambulance aides. Now I'll just lie down facing him, talk some, eye to eye, like so many times before, in bed, on beaches and such. A couple of just 62 years, or a couple of one, oldest lovers, oldest friends. His eyes open a bit teary. He whispered, sorry, dear heart. At once, I know my Rudy is there. I say back, there, love. Now we are one again. The fall did not take him away, not this time. I lay there, two oldies on the floor, waiting for the right moment to resume, to try to live again. Rudy fell. He'll fall again. One day, I'll fall too. End of poem. This also is free verse. Think of your days as a child. Title of this poem is Grell. When I was this many, you can't count the thumb, I had this soft friend, a horsey, all felt and tan, about the size of a piece of toast, but with legs. I could sleep with it, up close to my face, and curl up to be safe. I called it Grell. My parents never could figure out why. They talked about it a lot and giggly smiled. I always wanted Grell with me, at my nap, in the car, when I was afraid. Sammy's dad had to leave forever, and Sammy from next door would never see him again. He cried. We both did. I gave him Grell, so he wouldn't be sad at night. It was all I had. I missed Grell. Then when I was this many, and this one over here, Sammy's family moved away. I thought Grell was gone forever. Much later, when I was big, I heard Sammy died in the war. About then, I was packing my things and my mom gave me a box of old stuff when I was, really little. Stuck in the corner at the bottom, faded and dusty, was Grell. I picked it up softly. I think Grell was sad. I put it in my suit pocket. Later that day, I went to Sammy's memorial in the city. I saw his mom. I gave her Grell for Sammy. She said she'd give it to him. It was the right thing to do. Sammy will be happy now, and so will Grell. End of poem.
Yes.
And finally, a free verse, a composite of experiences from my early life. The title, The House Down the Road. A tad over 3 blocks down Marion Lane, on the left is an idyllic Cape Cod. I must have passed it 1,000 times. My own picturesque, perfect postcard place. Couched in the right light, dappling rays, fresh painted, white fence, ruby red front door. Never once did I not try looking in. A golden kick plate, bright brass knocker ring, begging to be seen, this family within. Lots of plain pane windows, no blinds, no sheers. There it stands proudly these many years. In deep snows that had filled front walkways, in warming, romantic, radiated lustrous light, Hearth hues burst through the panes beyond the glass. One spring I saw a fine fetching lass run across this closely manicured front lawn with her bouncing blonde, long locks glowing gleefully. I mused as I passed by, half staring. We'd marry maybe, wishful pairing, and have a dreamy story about Cape Cod too. That fall our family moved far away. But was I not to see her? Who's to say? Still, I remember that house, that dream. I might have married her, my crazy scheme. Last night it snowed. Drove that road again. 5 years later, that same house was still there. On the outside, the front door was now lined green. Inside, a fire burns brilliant like before. I saw this striking blonde while I gawked. Startled, the green door opens. She walked across the snowy street without her coat. Poised, she stood there and said straight to me, "Aren't you the boy who used to stare?" Through my window, I gushed, "Why, yes, I am." She said she'd wondered about me, even though they'd never known my name. Star-crossed, my illusion had dreamt back. Those private affections landed somehow. Illusions can come true. They often do. Left my car, took her hand, went inside. Over a cozy cocoa we chatted. No longer a star from afar, so near. New worlds would now open for us right here. Lost love came home to the house down the road. End of poem. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Greg. Our next poet is Mary Katherine Wainwright. Mary Katherine is a writer and retired professor of American literature. Her poetry and prose have been published in many books and literary journals, including Calliope, Phoebe, Solamente and San Miguel II, and the Harlem Renaissance Revaluations. Published in 2018, A Taste of Salt Poems is her first collection of poetry. En route, Essays was published in 2019. Mary Katherine earned a PhD in American Studies at Purdue University and taught literature and writing for over 30 years in major US colleges and universities, including the State College of Florida. She has received numerous fellowships and awards from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Florida Humanities Council, and the McKnight Foundation for Higher Education, among others. A Florida native, Wainwright recently returned to Sarasota after spending 11 years in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. Please welcome Mary Katherine Wainwright.
Thank you. Thank you, Georgia. That was lovely. It's a real pleasure to read today with fellow poets Greg and Doug, and wonderful that Bookstore One is sponsoring these throughout the month. Just wonderful event. So thank you. I did a Zoom reading last month, and I was asked to read my Florida poems, or some of my Florida poems. So I thought today I would read a few of the poems that I wrote during and about traveling elsewhere. So the first one is was written during my first trip to Europe. And of course, I was much younger, and oh, I was so much in love. So this is called Poem from Vienna. Today, you enter my thoughts like the opening refrains of a Strauss waltz from last night's operetta. If you were here, I would buy you a flower from the stall on the corner and introduce you to the kind-faced Viennese gentleman who sits beside me on the park bench, humming under his breath to violin sounds from the bandstand. If you were here, I would take you to the cafe where I have café mit Milch every afternoon, served by the smiling, blonde-haired waitress who always brings, unasked, a glass of cold water and tells me auf Wiedersehen when I leave. If you were here, I would be as the alpine flowers I see from the train window, thriving on the mountainside where they belong. And the second one was from that same trip. I kind of went everywhere. Once I discovered Europe, I was like turned loose. So this is Night Train Through France. On my first train trip through the Alps from Luxembourg to Rome, we were young with our backpacks, recited Millay and Cummings, and sometimes Eliot's lines about journeys, the way we always arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. I rode through France on a wooden bench, third class, sitting up all night in a compartment with a young father and son who spoke only French. All we could do was watch together the white snows of the Alps under the light of a full moon, quiet, until the boy reached in his bag for a wrapped chocolate, sticky and smashed from so much traveling, placed it in my palm softly, the way a kitten can edge its way to the hem of your skirt, then bat it with white paws. Perhaps Edna Millay took this same trip through the Alps, riding all night, the way she rode the ferry, back and forth, laughing and merry. In the morning, she gave a bag of peaches and all her coins to an old woman at the station. Perhaps she would have spoken French to the young boy, had a gift for him in her bag, a miniature of the Eiffel Tower or a souvenir spoon with the Alps carved in the handle. Another of my favorite cities is Paris, and a favorite street there, I hope you know it, is Rue Mouffetard, early June. I walk uphill past fruit stands, boxes of raspberries, rows of apricots, peaches stacked in careful pyramids. Then the markets, fresh chickens in a row like tombstones, baked chickens turning on racks of skewers, sparrows perch there when no one is looking. On the corner is the chocolate shop, wooden paddles churn sticky syrup, soon to be creams and ganache truffles. Women click past, smart suits, shoulder pads, stockings with seams, shoes with pointed toes and little sharp heels. So Parisian going to market on this narrow cobblestone street, the 14th century route from Paris to Rome. And no tour of Europe can be without Tuscany. Postcards from Tuscany. I sent 10 postcards today to say, I wish you were here to see the sun shine sepia over terracotta roofed villages. Poets write of the bliss of solitude, but here there is no bliss. Even the butterflies travel in pairs, and the only green hides under the dust on olive leaves at the foot of the path. In the noon sun, women hang clothes on a line, carefully, edge to edge, one pin for two corners. Last night, in the middle of the Piazza del Duomo, I thought I heard your laugh, but it was lovers embracing against the stone walls of the compound. I spend long days wandering up steep hills, along curved alleys, cobblestone paths, visit churches to see relics, St. Catherine's head, St. Christopher's cane, hear strains of Ave Maria escaping from the door of Dante's church. Yesterday, I drank Chianti at a sidewalk cafe, watched brown-haired men with suntanned arms play chess blindfolded. So I'll leave the travel theme and read a poem that's based on a very unusual poetic form. It's called a pantoum, and it's a Malaysian verse poem, and it's based on repeating lines. And I know you will hear the repetition, rhyming lines, I should say. The poem is from a poem by a New York poet, John Yao. And these are the two lines from his poem that I used to base my poem on. Leonardo knew the wings of birds would one day be worn by men, that they were destined to lift their shadow above the clouds. One day, men would wear wings. Leonardo knew this, but he did not know what would happen to women when men used the wings of birds to rise above clouds. Leonardo didn't know this. Women would wave goodbye and plant seeds when men used the wings of birds to rise above clouds. They would build maypoles in spring and garnish them with flowers. Women waved goodbye and planted seeds in fields next to flocks of white sheep and brown cows. They built maypoles in spring and garnished them with flowers, glancing occasionally at shadows flying overhead. In fields next to flocks of white sheep and brown cows, women grew deep into dark earth, while glancing occasionally at shadows flying overhead. They buried the dead and planted potatoes. Women grew deep into dark earth when men grew wings to fly overhead. They buried the dead and planted potatoes and filled front porches with rocking chairs, lemonade, jump rope. When men grew wings to fly overhead, women grew roses on lattice fences, filled front porches with rocking chairs, lemonade, jump ropes, and walked with shoulders high toward each other. Women grew roses on lattice fences while men were destined to lift their shadows above the clouds. Women walked with shoulders high toward each other and forgot about the wings of birds worn by men. Men were destined to lift their shadows above the clouds, but they didn't know what happened to women. All Leonardo knew was one day men would wear wings. And for my last poem, I see you, Cynthia. There you are. I used to apologize. I didn't ever want to offend anyone's religion, but someone told me, quit apologizing, or, in advance. This poem is, it's an example of exphrasis, which is a kind of poem that uses a visual art object as the basis. And this is one of my favorite images. It's the Annunciation. And many, many artists have captured this scene in biblical history. I've been fascinated by this image for years. And this is my poem, The Annunciation. The poem itself is modeled after Sharon Olds' poem. You may know it, May 1939. The Annunciation. At the center of some Renaissance painting, the angel kneels beside a fluted marble column. Black cypress trees, rigid as Roman armies, line up behind his head. He offers a white lily. Mary sits in her blue robe, her hands folded, a halo crowning her head. Her book still open, abandoned on the floor. The dove hovers overhead. They are about to enact the scene. The angel is about to reveal the mystery. Mary is about to acquiesce. She is young, she is pregnant. She only knows she has no choice. She has not been asked. I want to go to her and say, no. Tell them no. Refuse the angel. You are the wrong woman. This is the wrong act. Terrible things will happen. You cannot imagine. You will suffer in ways you've never thought of. I want to go to her there on her throne that April afternoon and say it, her astonished eyes turning to me as I urge her to retrieve her book, become a scholar, a philosopher, a poet, change the course of history, the destiny of women. I want to say the world will not learn from your sacrifice, but I don't. The heavenly host gathered in the corner drown out my voice. Thank you all. I love seeing my friends there in the audience. So thank you very much.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary Catherine. That was lovely. Our final poet for today is Doug Knowlton. I think many of you here know Doug. And for Doug, the memory of writing a first poem harks back to 1966. Influences came and went: Tennyson, Emily, Frost, Stevens, and Teasdale, too many to name. He remembers having to memorize a portion of Thanatopsis in school. The school
I
paper,
did.
and the school paper printed a first published poem his junior year. But it wasn't until Oscar Chudanowski, bookseller and proprietor of Oscar's Books in his hometown of Huntington, New York, handed him a copy of Leaves of Grass that a deep identification began to emerge. And Doug says, writing poetry would be how all the crazy feelings and ideas and rushes of meaning might be understood, or at least experienced, if only as a conversation with the paper. He often publishes chapbooks for friends and family, and Doug is one of the wonderful, wonderful staff members of Bookstore #1. And so all of you can come in and visit him there. Okay, welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Georgia. I'm going to try something new today. And it's not really new, but if you see your screen filled up with my poems and photos, that's not an error. That's something I actually intend to do. If it doesn't happen, well, I'll still read them. I feel privileged to be in such elevated company. My claim to fame is really only I started as an English major, Mary Catherine, in my freshman year in 1970. So, and then I pulled a Kerouac, you might say. And so for the first poem I'm putting up, you'll see this odd one, which is a only prose poem I think I've ever written. It's called 9 Mile Hill, missing poem. I don't have the poem. That's what I would have called it, though. I'm sure I wrote it down, but who knows where it went. All that remains is the memory of listening to Janice. The note below the remains stamped in my brain and written out a year or 3 ago, 40 years late, with their anxious anticipation of catching a ride in a northerly direction. Yeah, caught a ride out of Chattanooga with a convict, headed south on the 59. It was February, about 4 months after she recorded the cover of Christopherson and Foster's masterpiece. It hit the stations just as the squirrely grease monkey at the wheel took on the 20 towards Shreveport. He had a full head of slick back dark hair, and he was skinny and edgy, not somebody to be messed with. Speed Freak. His story that he'd left the garage in Choo Choo Town and the asshole he worked for with 4 brand new tires for his Mustang. He showed off the pistol under his seat, and I got busy conceiving a poem in my head about the ride. Somewhere over the Texas border, we picked up a couple hitchhiking, and things got real interesting. Heard some stories about a place called Angola. Apparently not the country in southern Africa I'd learned about from collecting stamps. Stayed with the woman's Christian sister in Albuquerque. That was tense. We were back on the road in no time, though, and later I was relieved to be alone again up in Santa Fe. Pitch black hitching up to Colorado. Janice with me the whole way. Traded jackets with Mr. Angola. He must have had a sharp eye for World War II collectibles. Sorry, Uncle Fred. A Latino Air Force pilot picked me up in his drafty car just past Taos while the temperatures plummeted. He fed me breakfast in Denver before I went on up to Big Thompson in Boulder. I reckon we've all got our stories. Well, though I don't write prose poems, I guess this is the poem.
Nice.
This one is very early. I worked up north of Boston when I was 16, 17 in a hospital up there, and would go into Boston to on days off. And this one's called While Riding a Subway North of Boston in August. The view I remember, the feeling I can touch even now. The poverty in that scene, revealing the poverty in my mind. Like finds like to relate. Somehow you might also sense it. A carpet hangs desperately from a cluttered sill. A fence shedding paint beneath the weight and wear of the years, choked between identical red brick contortions of some man's genius scheme of architecture. Emily, I call her, young girl of the unknown, anonymous existence, leans out of a shabby room. Curtains flutter around her face and form. She takes overdoses of her dreams and wonders, perhaps why someone stares back. Riding a subway out of Boston in August. This one, even though my mom is in it, the mulberry friend is in the picture you can see, I hope, behind Tim, my dog. This picture was taken by my father in 1961, and no other explanations needed. Mulberry friend. And it begins with an epigraph from Joy Harjo's Becoming 70 in American Sunrise. Your soul so finely woven, the silkworms went on strike, said the mulberry tree. We all have mulberry trees in our memory yard. They hold the place for skinned knees earned by small braveries, cousins you love who are gone. All memory bends to fit. We become poems. My mother eventually won out. Those horrid berries. When I was away, it disappeared. Couldn't tell you when exactly. Still, it was there outside my west window as a boy, back when I needed the company, the growing alongside. The window where the chickadees and jays, cardinals and brown thrashers could be seen at the feeder, striking as birds can be against the bright white of new fallen snow. The window where my father built the bookshelves, framing in a shelf where I could lean with Audubon as he taught me their names. Then, in spring, it called me up into its branches, venturing farther on each climb as it grew above the house peak, above the remodeled attic, above all the adults, above the street ball and bicycles, up there where one could finally see out beyond the houses, over the other trees, out where I would travel one day into the other worldly world, the places only known from books, or what I imagined in my only child mind, or from the frightful images my mother would try to instill after reading grim news in the Times about missing children. Mulberry Friend. And finally, wishing you all
Oh, beautiful.
a great Earth Day coming up in 4 days. This is one of my photos from the house we used to live in out in Manatee, Vinca rosea and an eastern tiger swallowtail in front of the butterfly bench. And this poem is called Spring of Springs, if I can get it to come up. There we go. On a January Saturday, 3 hours of sinking steps in soft clod-strewn soil behind the green tiller, at times conjuring a sled of malamutes, you the lone musher. Work allows no drift of fantasy. Still, signs augur in the loam, a piquant tang clamors on the wind, verses write themselves in the trees. They come to us with what the earth intones. Spring is imminent. Whether it arrives in a month or 6, spring is on the move. Anticipate its arrival. For we will say of this spring in years to come, it was the finest spring of our lives. We will speak of it in the kitchens and in the pubs, whisper its memory in the kirkyards and on the greens. We will bear witness to the spring of springs. Some say when a people have lost their vision, when a land no longer has hope, when a nation offers up its royals of peace to be hung in the square, when the past is all that remains, it is enough and will suffice. And yet, when the children ask, remember to tell them the stories, tell them what was lost, take them to a place beyond the melted asphalt and steel, where one might listen for any word from the earth. Spring of Springs. And that's it.
Thank you, Doug. Beautiful reading. Thank you all of our poets. We can unmute ourselves if we like and give them all a hand. Okay.
Yay.
What I would love to do now is to ask any of you who would like to make a comment to go ahead and unmute, and we can go ahead and speak with the poets. And I can see you all on my screen, those of you who have brought your video up anyway. So you might just raise a hand or signal to me if you'd like to say something in particular. So who wants to go? Yeah, Amy.
Yes. So besides this, where are you guys reading now?
Where are you? Did you hear her question?
Yeah, I don't have anything in the future. I had a reading in March, a Zoom reading, but I don't have anything out.
With COVID going on right now,
Yeah, it's hard.
it's pretty much all Zoom, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, at least it is for the time being. Others? Yes, Roberta?
I'll be reading the Tea House.
Oh, okay. Okay, great,
Okay.
great.
When?
Well, you might, before Roberta speaks, you might explain, Amy, what the tea house is.
Well-
Are you talking about the Elixir Tea House?
I assume so.
Okay,
Greg, is
okay,
that
okay,
what
okay.
you're talking about?
Yeah.
And what is it? Where is it? I don't know. I'm
It's
asking.
near the hospital.
It's a
Sarasota
small
Memorial?
small tea house. Steve, no, what's his last name? McAllister runs a small group there that, a handful of poets go there. I said it sort of as a joke because Amy and I met there several times before, and Doug knows the group. So it was like,
Isn't that Highland Avenue?
I believe it is Highland Avenue.
It's right across from Pacific Rim, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
good to know. Okay, great. Okay, Roberta, you had your hand up. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, yeah, hi. I just go by Casey. My last name is a nickname. I just wanted to thank all three of you for sharing your hearts and your words and your wonderful craft of language. And Mary Katherine, it's just a pure delight to hear a woman's perspective woven so subtly and so well into your work and into life observations. Leonardo knew one day men would wear wings, and the Annunciation. Your work really speaks to me.
thank
So,
you, Casey.
Thank you all three so much, and
So sweet.
in
Yeah.
the bookstore as well.
Anyone else want to make a comment or ask a question of one of our poets? Yeah, Cynthia.
Yeah, I wanted to greet Greg. I'm also a Philadelphian, third generation, and my kids make 4. And just wonder what part of Philly you're from.
Well, actually, the main line, I was born in Bryn Mawr Hospital, and we live out above a place called King of Prussia in Audubon right now. My wife and
Okay.
I, we moved out here just a few months back. So I've been.
Oh, I know all those places.
All Philadelphia.
Nice to hear their names. Yeah. And I wanted to say hello to my good friend, Mary Katherine Wainwright.
Hi,
When she
Cynthia.
lived in San Miguel de Allende, we saw each other frequently. We were part of the same writing group there. And, nice to hear those poems again. I hadn't heard the one about the wings, the men flying with wings, and that was really excellent. I enjoyed that
thank
very much.
you.
And of course, my favorite, the Annunciation one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to say anything?
Yeah.
Who was that?
I just was wondering what influences all the separate poets feel that have influenced them from other poets. You know, who are they reading now? Who have they felt has really affected or influenced their work? I'd really like to know. Thanks.
Should I start? I can
Yeah,
start.
go ahead, Mary Katherine.
Well, of course, all the ones Doug mentioned, you know, that brings us all to poetry. And, but, you know, I've been really fortunate to have had incredible mentors and teachers through the years. And William Slaughter, Donna Massini, Joy Harjo have just been wonderful in my life. And there are others, and I'm sorry, I don't like to forget, but those poets have meant a lot to me, and I continue to go back and read their works, along with probably one of my favorites, Elizabeth Bishop, and I don't know, I just have a bookshelf full of poets.
My two of the last 20 years or so, I could name so many, and I read so many to write blurbs on of the younger ones who keep me on my toes. But the two that come immediately to mind, one a man and one woman, but both with the last name that starts with Hirsch.
Mm.
Ed Hirsch and Jane Hirschfield.
Hmm.
And, both of them were key to my awakening around the late 90s. Met Jane in 2005, 6, somewhere in there. And she read one of my little chapbooks and very graciously offered a little blurb of her own. And of course, Ed, we know here in Sarasota because of Georgia getting him and Amy Netsu, I can never remember.
Nesuko Matata Heel.
Yes, that. Her publisher says, yes, Amy Nez. But Ed is a key person, not only from his poems, which I've actually began reading in the 80s, but his book, How to Read a Poem and Fall in Love with Poetry, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books about poems.
Yeah, Greg, you have influences you'd like to tell us about?
'Twas really in the slithy toes, the gyring gimble and away, old Mimsy where the bar grove grows and the moon's out grass out grave. So rested he by the tum-tum tree and stood a while and thought. And as he thought, through the Tolgi woods, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came through the Tolgi woods and burgled as he came. 1, 2, through and through the vorpal blade went snicker snack, and with its head he left it dead and went galumping back. Hast thou slain the mighty Jabberwock, my son? Come to my arms, my most beamish boy. Callooh, Calais, he chortled in his joy. Bruce Carroll. My dad would recite that poem to my brother who's on this call, and I think my son and daughter-in-law have heard it as well. It's a fantastic poem, but when you're 6 and 7 and you hear this kind of thing coming from an adult, it has a fantastic impression on the concept of words and fantasy. And I'm going to give you a litany of the almost every poet I run into affects me. Certainly Doug has affected me, and Mary Katherine today has affected me. This is the poetic life. You are like a ping pong ball in a fantasy world of language and touch. And so I'm impressed by all, and forever eternally thankful to Georgia.
Anyone else want to say anything before we wrap up today, before it's too late to have your say?
I'd like to add 2 contemporary poets. I think writing today, Lee Young Lee is just one of the finest poets that we've ever had. And also Richard Blanco, who I believe is on the faculty at FIU. I'm not sure how much he is in residence, but he is just fabulous. His poem was read at Obama's inauguration and also at the opening of U.S. Cuba reopening. And he's just a lovely human being and a fabulous poet.
Yeah, I agree with that. Richard is a real friend of Bookstore One. And
good.
He's been in Sarasota a couple of times. And I agree. He's one of the best. He's certainly someone I like to emulate. I wish I could write like Richard Blanco.
I know.
Yeah, right.
We all do.
Yeah, right. Anyone else want to say anything? No? If not, then I'm going to wish you all a good afternoon. And thank you to our poets once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience, because what is poetry if it can't be spoken to an audience? Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks,
And
Georgia.
Bye, Mary Kath.
Bye. So good to see you. Sherry Ray, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.